Hello, welcome to part 2 of the White Album. This is my original copy, signed by Yoko Ono, and it's looking a little bit worse for wear at the moment. I won't show you both discs, but still in reasonably good condition. I think this is a late 70s stereo pressing. So a couple of things about the White Album which you may not have heard before. This originally was going to be called A Doll's House, and then someone came up with that title, so they had to think again. And then I think it was Paul came up with the kind of minimalist white cover. And it was actually, the album was called The Beatles, but pretty soon it was called The White Album for obvious reasons. Apart from the 30 tracks laid down, believe it or not, there were several others which were worked on but didn't make the cut. So could have even been longer than a double album. Most of the ones which were rejected were either not completed or were not worthy, I think, of inclusion. So not completed would have included an early version of Her Majesty, which turned up on Abbey Road later, and an early work through of Maxwell's Silver Hammer, both from Paul. Also George had a track called Not Guilty, which was worked on quite laboriously, and you can hear that version on Anthology. It's not bad, and it turned up 10 years later on his solo album George Harrison. It's not bad, but you can see if they had to pick 4 George tracks, then that was the one which had to go, I'm afraid. What else can I tell you about the White Album? Obviously it came with these pictures, which I had on my wall, all 4 Beatles, heavy blue tack stains on all of them. And I don't know if you knew, but John had the White Album pictures on the wall of his hospital bedroom where he was with Yoko when they had the miscarriage about a month after this album came out. Okay, what else? Miscellaneous tidbits like George says he only listened to side 1. Ringo went on record saying it was too much information to take in, should have been issued as 2 albums, the White and the Whiter album. But significantly, he didn't say it should have been reduced to a single album, which is what George Martin, the producer, is famous or infamous for saying. Okay, so we move on to side 3 now, and this starts off with Paul's Rocker Birthday. And again, brilliant band version of this. Far superior to any time that Paul has tried to do it live in concert, or anyone else has tried it for that matter. John's on record saying I think he thought it was a piece of rubbish, but I think he was being a bit harsh because it's got a lot of energy, this track, and nice sentiment as well. And then we move to Year Blues, which is a parody of the blues from John. And apparently this track was recorded in a little tiny room where they all crammed themselves into this little room and just played together. A true ensemble performance, and a great guitar solo at the end, which could have been from John or George, I'm not quite sure. I think opinion is divided on that one. So then we move to Mother Nature's Son. I don't know where Paul gets these melodies from, it's incredible, because he's already come up with Martha and I Will on this album, not to mention Obla D, and then he comes up with Mother Nature's Son, which is, you know, most people would be happy just to have written this one song in their entire life, and this was just another track of 12 of Paul's on this album, and 12 came from John, 4 from George and 1 from Ringo, I think I'm right in saying. Or maybe it was 13 from Paul, including Wild Honey Pie. I'm not sure. Anyway, so after Mother Nature's Son, you know, one book says this was rather lost on side 3 and maybe should have been dropped. What the hell? Okay, surrounded by rockers, but so what? I think this album actually is brilliantly sequenced. John and Paul worked on it, I think, in a 24-hour session round the clock, trying to get the sequencing right, and they certainly did a great job. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. The next track, which is not about drugs. It's kind of a meaningless lyric probably, with a few double entendres in it, but very energetic track and great guitar from George, great drumming from Ringo. I love this track, great bass from Paul as well. So then we move into Sexy Sadie, which is another example of how the band together is better than they are individually, because if this track had, and when it was first tried out in the studio, it wasn't particularly appealing and it wasn't particularly satisfactory, the sound that they got. And the thing which elevates it to the finished album, what I would say masterpiece, is the interjection of piano. And Paul probably must have suggested this somewhere along the line, that I could lay down a good piano part on it, and he does that, and the effect is just brilliant. This swampy piano sound that he gets sounds like it comes from another planet. It's just brilliant, and the whole song is elevated. It's about the Maharishi, apparently. I mean, it is, but Lennon didn't want to be so direct, so he disguised the lyric and called it Sexy Sadie. Not everyone rates this song, but I rate it. I'll give that one 10 out of 10. Helter Skelter is next from, I was going to hold John's picture up there, because it's perhaps more in his style, but it's actually from Paul. This track is probably a little bit overrated in my opinion. Everyone raves about it because it was kind of, you know, heavy and quite bizarre, and maybe predictive of some of the heavy rock which came in the 70s. But personally, as a song, I don't love it. The lyrics are kind of meaningless. The drumming, the whole sound is okay, but and the original version was 27 minutes, so at least we're spared of that. We're spared that, I should say. But at the end, you know, Ringo screams, "I got blisters on my fingers," because he'd been drumming for 27 minutes. It's not a bad song, it's just I think people rave about it a little too much and not enough about some of the other tracks on this album. For example, the next track from George, which is so unknown amongst the general public. It's farcical. I think this is a real fan song. All the fans love it. Buried there at the end of side 3 on the White Album. So if you haven't picked up the White Album, you won't find this song long on any compilations. But it's got a glorious melody, somewhat reminiscent of Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands from Dylan, and some nice piano and organ from Paul. And when Paul had a wine bottle on the top of his piano, started wobbling and created that sound that he had at the end, which is quite bizarre. So great end to side 3, and then side 4 starts off with the slow version of Revolution, which was actually the first version to be recorded. The version which had previously been released on the back of the Hey Jude single was a faster version. So this is the slow version, and originally John had wanted to release this as a single, and the others said no, it's too slow, and quite rightly so in my opinion. It would have been too slow as a single, but as an album track it's perfect. Nice sound they get, nice relaxed feel, and of course the words are the same as on the fast version. Interestingly here he says, if you talk about destruction, don't you know you can count me out in? So he says both because he hadn't made up his mind at the time. So Paul follows that with Honey Pie, which is one of those tracks that probably John and George hated, but who cares, it follows brilliantly. Again, the sequencing of the album is superb. To go from Revolution to Honey Pie is very amusing and actually works really well, and the tune is just another one of these melodies which Paul's coming out with effortlessly in 1968-69. It was absolutely a melodic peak period for him. And John contributes a very nice short guitar solo as well. So again, they're contributing even when they don't perhaps like each other's songs. So all of each other's songs. So Savoy Truffle is George's last contribution to the album, and it's very amusing. It's about Eric Clapton's sweet tooth, and there was a chocolate box called Good News, which had all the chocolates inside, and George basically took the words of those chocolates and the names of those chocolates and created the song. Green Tangerine, Montélimar, Ginger Sling, Pineapple Heart, they were all chocolates from the Good News chocolate box. And it also contains quite an amusing reference to Obladi. We all know Obladi Blada, that can you tell me where you are? And also, you know that what you eat you are, which is quite an amusing lyric, which apparently Derek Taylor contributed. By the way, on this subject of contributing to each other's words, on the song Piggies, apparently John contributed the amusing line at the end about clutching forks and knives to eat their bacon. Apparently that line came from John. So then we come on to, where are we? We come on to Cry Baby Cry, which is a great song from John. Quite inexplicably, in the Playboy interview in 1980, when he was asked about, because he went through all the songs and was asked to give a comment, and about most of them he had a good memory, but about this one he just said, "Not mine, piece of rubbish." And I was really quite upset with David Sheff for not saying, "Excuse me, this is the track from the White Album, you know," and start singing it or something, and John would have surely said, "Oh yeah, sorry." But anyway, he's on record now, because he died shortly after that and he didn't have a chance to correct himself, but John's on record now as saying this is not his song, which obviously it is his song, and it's brilliant, and it's great piano, great use of the bass piano on this track, really spooky atmosphere, great words. Again, probably one of the tracks which George Martin wanted to drop, but excuse me, you're not going to drop that one. Revolution 9 follows, and this is a very controversial song. A lot of fans even couldn't understand what the hell this was doing on a Beatles album. In fairness, it probably does belong on one of John's more experimental albums with Yoko, but you know, us Beatles fans, we can tolerate one song in that vein on a Beatles album. It's quite an amusing listen, certainly 3 or 4 times. It doesn't really bear up for too much repeated listening because it's quite long, and but it's, you know, it's quite fun to hear once in a while, and you know, there's a serious message behind it, and it's kind of out there. It's very avant-garde, but again, to follow that with the Ringo song Good Night, which John wrote, again, very nice contrast to go from that horrific Revolution landscape to the softly sung Good Night from Ringo with these lush strings from George Martin. Quite tongue-in-cheek programming from John and Paul when they put the tracks together, and a perfect end to the album. It really is a masterpiece, this album, and push comes to shove, probably my favourite album of all time, along with Abbey Road. But I've had to take one to a desert island. I'd take this one because there's 30 tracks on this one, and Abbey Road's only a single. So that was the White Album. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.